Okay. The program co-hosted by myself, Andre Lopez Turner, with Juan Toledo, the editor of Revista Perro Negro, which means the Black Dog magazine in English, is in conversation for an hour with Misha Milovanovic. She is a Serbian-born, London-based artist working over various mediums, specifically painting, sculptor, and ceramicist she is. So Misha, very nice to have you in the Zoom virtual studio. Thank you very much for turning up.
Thank you guys for inviting me. I'm honored.
But what kind of art were you consuming in Serbia as a young person, as a young girl? Were you consuming, paying attention to rock albums, covers? What was the kind of the main reference you have there in terms of art
I,
growing up?
yeah, mainly movies, but we grew up. I grew up in the times where culture was a real predominant source of people's spiritual life.
Mhm.
And there was a huge amount of reading involved, going to theater. Music was massive. I think because what was really interesting, even though we grew up in a kind of socialist
Mhm.
environment, we were surrounded by the newly built architecture, the brutalism. We had amazing rock music and
Yeah.
youth culture. There was just so much going on. I was personally interested in every form of art, but I was leaning the most towards filmmaking and cinema and storytelling. That
Yeah.
really is my first love. And as a kid, I was buying records, collecting cartoons, selling books. As kids, we were encouraged one day a year to bring our books, our secondhand books and our cartoons and anything that we collected and actually exchange or sell. And that
Yeah.
it was a big day of celebration. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was just, yeah, we were immersed in culture and we were also
Yeah.
creating it at the same
Uh,
time.
and, and forgive me for asking this, Misha. It's mainly my ignorance, but I would imagine that when you say music, I would imagine all kinds of music, Bach and Beatles at the same time. I would imagine.
Well,
I would imagine, it's sort of kind of, you could imagine this idea of the socialist states have a very functional, really solid educational programs, which included chess play, mathematics, and I would imagine classical music. But I don't know if that's my perception is completely
Oh,
wrong
no,
or not.
no, no, totally, totally. I remember in a primary school, like between grade, like say sixth grade or something, so that's the age of 12, being in musical, so it was called musical club, and there were loads and lots of records, and you were encouraged to bring your own records. So we listened to classical music, but then I remember when punk started, there were old boys who brought some punk music, and they were like dancing around, and I was like, oh my God, what's going on here? You're like, this is all new. But so as kids, we were taken to ballet and opera as well. This was part of the school
Yeah,
curriculum.
yeah,
And I remember as a kid, because we lived in the center of the town, the main park in on Sunday morning, people come and dance. And so there was a live music, so people can do folk dance, they could do tango, and also it was just everywhere. Like culture was everywhere, and we didn't have a lot of money, but we made things up and we make things work for ourselves. So yeah, it was always creativity, and that's why like how I started to be creative as a kid was to make my own clothes with my
yeah,
mom. And yeah, that we were very encouraged to make things all the
yeah.
time.
But very eclectic at the same time.
Absolutely eclectic. Because of socialism, we had a lot of not only Russian and American influence, which was such a contradiction, but we
Mhm.
also had Latin American poets and writers.
Yeah,
Marquez,
yeah,
Marquez was massive.
yeah, yeah. I remember,
I I
yeah,
fell in love with Marquez when I was 14. I
incredible.
tell you the story. I had mumps, and I was sent from school to the doctors, and they say you are now isolating for 14 days. And on the way back home, I got a book, 100 Years of Solitude, and I read it in 2 weeks,
Incredible.
like entire 2 weeks, I was just reading this book day and night. I think I hardly slept with these mumps that were really like so painful. But it blew my mind, and I think very much made me into a person creatively that I am, because it showed me that everything is possible. You just
but that's remarkable, Misha, because I can tell you, I mean, it's a book that, well, it's one of those books talk about in certain ways. It's the central book of the boom generation, and obviously the boom, Latin American literary boom. I don't know anybody at the age of 14 who has read that book. Everybody has to be a bit older. In fact, I read it when I was about in my 20s. I didn't read it before I was 22 or something.
Wow.
So quite remarkable that a 14-year-old can go through 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia
I
Marquez.
don't think I was a genius. It was just
No, but it's remarkable. It's not, but it's just your imagination was there. I mean,
it was so, it's one of the, I mean, I am so in awe on Marquez, and I have nothing but he's like my grandfather, imagine your grandfather.
Great.
Sorry, Andre, you were going to ask something.
Yeah.
No, it just makes me laugh, really. I mean, I was a big Marquez fan as well, and I think when you're 14, you are given books to read at school, which are sort of way beyond you. We had to read things like Orwell and Kafka. I mean, at 14, it's sort of ridiculous, really. But I think at least with Marquez, you get such a wonderful vocabulary. I mean, I thought his when I encountered him, I really liked magical realism, but I just was amazed. I was learning Spanish, just starting to learn Spanish, and I just couldn't believe the vocabulary that he was using as well as the sentence structures and things.
Yeah, amazing.
But I kind of, not knowing a lot about, well, I did a little bit on Yugoslavian politics, but not on what we're talking about. And I sort of had this idea, actually, when you first started talking, that it would be very much more nationalistic and a bit more independent. So like would have been celebrating the country and the local culture, and not so much of the external. Not that that's, and I think that's a good thing. So I'm quite amazed when I hear.
Not really, because we had this thing called how do I translate this? The independence. I think it's nezavisni. So there is an English version of this. I think it's the independence. So these were the congregations, political alliance. I think it's called the Alliance of Tito. So it was African countries.
Yeah, they were. Sorry to interrupt. Non-aligned movement. It's called the non-aligned movement.
Yeah. And Latin American countries were part of that too. Yeah. African, Latin Americans, and Tito was one of them, which he was never was pro-Moscow completely. Yeah.
This is the reason why we had this outside world, and not necessarily just like American and Russian, for example, which have spun some amazing writers and creatives as well. But this is the reason why we were so open and knowing, and we had students from all these countries that we could mix with and be culturally kind of influenced. Yeah, and there was something, we were the kings of political correctness, in a way that our teachings were very sort of pro-Black history, feminism. We were taught to respect every single person, regardless of their skin of color, of their sex or creed, and that's very progressive.
But I mean, in certain ways, well, without getting into politics too much, but Yugoslavia was a success of multiculturalism, or at least multi-religious alliances there, kept by Tito. That's something that disappeared when the collapse of the Soviet Union, the collapse of the socialism, and that's when the Balkans Wars happened. Because of that, Belgrade was keeping together a quite diverse group of people under the name of Yugoslavia. And it was very, as you said, I mean, it was one of those countries which was sort of kind of a success story within the socialist bloc. Was considered that way. I remember, I mean, at university talking about Yugoslavia compared to other countries.
Well, all of that, and also the horrible denigration of international socialism by free market capitalist America, which totally distorted and distorts what socialism is, as opposed to communism. And you know, and that was evidence of all of what you're what we're talking about.
Yes.
You know, to be that sort of eclectic, multicultural, cultured, educated. Yes, there might not have been kind of maybe the material wonders, but of an American type of capitalism. But you know, you had marvelous educations, didn't you? Marvelous educations, and it's evidence in what you were reading at such a young age. So where did you when I think about your work as well, I find it very, very colorful. So you say it's about joy, and I always see lovely pastel colors, lots of pinks, and dare I say it, psychedelic type of colors, and greens and purples and that. And I often think that's a part of your where you come from as well. Am I right or wrong? It's kind of quite a vibrant, colorful place, the way it's painted. Colors of would you say Central Europe? Or
You're probably asking me, do the colors in my work come from the kind of landscape of my culture or something like that? I don't know necessarily if it does. I look at some of the artists and some of the amazing painters that I was looking at when I was growing up that come from my part of the world, Serbia, specifically also from the Croatia and, you know, Slovenia and that kind of whole region. I don't really remember the colors very much. I think it was much more chiaroscuro orientated, very traditionalistic. I mean, one of our biggest and most important painters is Vladimir Veličković, who sadly passed away last year. A really great painter who was influenced by Bacon and just the most fantastic kind of master of you know, paint. It was all gray, black, you know, very, very dark, very metaphysical subject matters. I don't know. No. I think my kind of imagination.
It's quite interesting. No, I mean, I'm thinking about your sensitivity in certain ways. I was thinking about you reading Gabriel Garcia Marquez at the age of 14 and falling in love with that book. And probably, I don't know, painters like Kandinsky and painters like Miro, for example, much more close to you.
Absolutely, totally. As a kid, I saved up for probably about a year and a half, hard saving. I was doing a lot of, you know, kid type of jobs and stuff to buy this massive big book on Leonardo's drawings. And that was like how I began to draw. I was always drawing, but I didn't really ever think I was going to be an artist. I had ambitions of being working around film and being in the film world, because as I said, I love stories and I was very much influenced by people like Fellini, and we have this great director called Emir Kusturica, whose work I absolutely adore. Yeah, I mean, who did I look into as a kid? Like, I looked at, absolutely loved all the Dada movement. Basically, have you guys seen the movie by Woody Allen, Midnight in Paris, where the main character, the protagonist, goes back in a nighttime into 1920s? I would die to be in that story, to be with these people, because they're all my heroes. So all that kind of First War to the Second World War, all those movements, you know, the Fauvists, the
Cubists,
all of them, like each and every one of them, and some of them don't really have strong colors and others do. And I think Gauguin, in terms of color, is to me just, you know, I could just stand in front of these paintings forever and just see how he's put pink and brown together, and there's a bit of orange and yellow, and just the way that these people were able to create a space. Somebody like Ken Keefe, who is a very obscure English painter, who's an amazing colorist, a Sidney Nolan, Australian painter. I am just naturally drawn to color, but I also absolutely love deep, dark, you know, storytelling of somebody like Veličković, or even, you know, Goya and El Greco, because, you know, in their works, like El Greco's paintings were painted centuries ago, but when you look at them, they almost like have that
color.
So I draw my inspiration from various places, and if it talks to me, it doesn't. It could be a dress in a charity shop. It will influence me, and I know why it is. It's either pattern or shape or the way it is. It doesn't have to be high art, and it doesn't have to be low art. It's just I'm very intuitive about either art or colors, and very often I feel like I should be born an insect, because I am just drawn to colors so much that, you know, I'd be like, oh my god, orange, you know, go there. But also there is something to be said about colors, that there is a real science in the essence of color. Colors are incredibly healing, and we haven't even got there. We've just begun a little bit with the color theory as a modular of psychology, but I think in the future people will actually go to the rooms and be prescribed certain types of colors, and you know that has an incredible
no, absolutely, it's true. Actually, I know of cases of autistic children with severe autism. They recommend certain kind of colors to certain kind of kids. I mean, apparently some colors trigger sort of much more relaxed atmosphere for them, etc., etc. So yes, and I remember when I was growing up in Bogota, one of my best friends at school, his father was a color acupuncturist. His father used to practice acupuncture with colors, I remember. And he has a kind of,
on your little
website.
website,
And I remember
I mean, I was going through it, and I like the phrases. You often feature discarded shards of consumerism, which I like as a phrase, unloved icons of disposability and careless consumption. You know, it sounds good. Yeah, I like that. So in other words, you know, you're looking at a dress and you think, well, that could be, you know, we could put that somewhere, or these kind of, as you say, these offcuts of colorful consumerism that people often are throwing away, and you're merging that. And I really like that.
That's very much to do with being an immigrant and knowing. I found this beautiful, strange objects around Portobello, where I live in London, which also has a market, and people bring things and sell and resell, and then they throw them away. And I would very often pick pieces up, like small toys and discarded things, and then I will do these drawings. And I did a series of very seriously kind of technically, you know, correct drawings of these discarded things, and I wanted to give them a new lease of life, and also to celebrate them. And really what was behind is this sense of immigration and what it means to be an immigrant, because this is something I struggle with to this day. You know, I'm still trying to figure out, do I belong here? You know, I could never belong here truly, nor that I belong back home either. So I think this is something that I am fascinated by kind of daily, and it really helps make my work as well.
Yeah. I was thinking about if you actually channel that into something positive, a positive side for your art. In this sense, a person who doesn't belong to here or there, which is in sort of kind of, how can I say, and a sort of kind of limbo in terms of identity, but identities are very fluid things. And I presume that as an artist, one of the advantages for you is that you can pick up the things that you like. You can pick up, you know, you just track the things that you like about being in England, or the things that you like about being from former Yugoslavia, or the things that you learn from being in a place like London, so cosmopolitan. So, you know, I mean, the faculty is about reinventing yourself, isn't it? And it's about how that reinvention of yourself is reflected in your art, for example. You know, I don't know. I mean, I think in those terms. I think, you know.
I think it's nice because it's very fluid what we're talking about. Because to use your words in your little in your bio on your website, I really like this one. You often and you've just said it. You said you feel like a displaced person, and then you said when you left Serbia for London. You always came and always have a stranger's perspective. And I think that's just what you've alluded to here. And you perceive the world as an outsider. So actually, you know, Misha, when you were writing the bio, it's just so accurate with what you say. So you're very connected to your values and your thoughts around this one.
Yeah.
And I think London is also a part of the world where a lot of displaced people come, or from various places, etc. And you can't not look at something from the perspective of an outsider.
Yeah.
Because you kind of are, but as you say, you can be an outsider in your country. And I will just put this to you, and anyone else, as a artist in particular, would you say, I actually think artists are always outsiders. Doesn't matter.
Oh yeah,
culture.
absolutely. I was just about to say that. So sorry to talk over you. I get a bit excited, so I'm like, I can't. I'm going to say something. That's exactly what I was going to say. I was talking to a great friend of mine a few days ago who's an artist, and we concluded that it's a place for misfits, really. But this is not either or, it's just is, nor that I'm an outsider and I'm suffering. It's just is. I'm just aware who I am, and I'm very comfortable with it, but I could never be comfortable. I'm most comfortable in transit. I'm most comfortable when I'm moving around. I'm most comfortable when I'm on an airplane or going somewhere. I love that. But I also understand the danger of that, because you can be too much in transit and not be grounded. It's really good to go through. It's really good to be an outsider. It's really good to come to the place like I did with my English passport when I went to Hague years ago to see a Vermeer exhibition. I was a student of St. Martin's College. I had my English passport. I came to the immigration point, and I was held for almost 2 hours by this pretty fascistic kind of Dutch police immigration officer who just didn't like the fact that I had a British passport, but could see that I was born in Serbia. And, and that, I think everybody needs to feel that, because it just makes you a better person. It makes you a much better person to really question, why is our government, and I know we decided we're not going to go into politics.
I mean, you could say anyone who's actually successful or in leadership has an outsider's outsider. Anyone who's actually creative is an outsider, because they're different. They're seeing things from a different perspective. They're getting treated differently. That if you talk about politics, they say, it's very lonely at the top. They say many prime ministers and stuff get very lonely because they are kind of, separated and divorced from everyone. I'm reading Obama's book halfway through, and he mentions this. I mean, it's remarkable. But in terms of seeing things and having a perspective, and you're touching on empathy as well, and you say that also in your bio on your website. You talk about being empathic and sensitive, and using colors and joy, etc. And yes, they make you I think they make you just a better person, a better artist, or better anything, actually. I don't know where to go much more with that, but I think it's one thing about any form of art and culture is trying to understand and be human, whatever that means.
Yeah, I think art and culture is there really to connect us, and it does, because I have fallen in love with a Colombian grandfather when I was 14, and that just made me want to go and travel and explore in the same way that somebody might fall in love with what I do, and it might really help them with their mental health, for example. This is why we have music. And I'm not saying this is why we have music. I'm not a god. I don't know why we have music and art, but I'm just saying that it really helps us all, lifts us all, inspires us all. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Oh, no, yeah. I mean, it's part of the quality of life, I think. It's fundamentally for the quality of life, and also emotional well-being. It channels a lot of emotions that even dark thoughts can be channeled through art and being resolved in a positive way rather than in a negative way.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of things.
It really did save my life. I had a bit of a tough childhood. My father was an alcoholic, and I used to really channel my anger and the stuff that was going on. I was channeling that into drawing and reading, and later on, into art. And I see how that really works for so many people. That art is it's soul food, really.
I think it's one thing about any form of art and culture is trying to understand and be human, whatever that means.
Yeah, I think art and culture is there really to connect us, and it does, because I have fallen in love with a Colombian grandfather when I was 14, and that just made me want to go and travel and explore in the same way that somebody might fall in love with what I do, and it might really help them with their mental health, for example. This is why we have music. And no, I mean, I'm not saying this is why we have music. I'm not a god. I don't know why we have music and art, but I'm just saying that it really helps us all, lifts us all, inspires us all. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Oh, no, yeah. I mean, it's part of the quality of life, I think. It's fundamentally for the quality of life, and also emotional well-being. It channels a lot of emotions that even dark thoughts can be channeled through art and being resolved in a positive way rather than in a negative way.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of things.
It really did save my life. I had a bit of a tough childhood. My father was an alcoholic, and I used to really channel my anger and the stuff that was going on. I was channeling that into drawing and reading, and later on, into art. And I see how that really works for so many people.
Misha, I wanted to go back to the whole thing about color, but now in the sense of on the three kind of main areas that you cover, which is painting, sculpture, and ceramics. The colorful element of your art is representing the three of them. You have never, for example, with the sculptures, it never occurred to you like your sculptures are colorful as your paintings. That's not a natural thing. Basically, you are doing it's. In other words, it's more natural to take the palette and to paint, a painting with colors because you're experimenting with a culture. You're dealing with materials that by necessity are not culture. They are not colorful. Sometimes they are, kind of grays, blacks, this kind of metallics and stuff like that. Tell me about color in your sculptures. Tell me how you come about that.
We would need to see an example. The people.
I'm gonna let me try to get some examples from your website if I can do it now, Mitch, and we can work on that one. Let's start with this one. Okay, let's see. Can we see that one? Yes. Can you see it? Yeah. Fine. So let's click on one of them. Let's click on this one, for example. Okay. So obviously, bonobo. Tell me about the name to start with. Bonobo.
So the name bonobo comes from the name for the monkey, which is the rainforest chimp, found in the places of the world where there's a very dense forest, and this is the closest relative to the humans there is. I tend to name my sculptures after the kind of animals and abstract shapes that come from nature. But the titles are also conceptualizing the richness of the influences that I have in my work. This sort of absorption of primitive and mythological, perhaps even childlike elements, and a lot of homage to people like Miro, Louis Bourgeois, Noguchi, Picasso, and other artists. And my work blends animal shapes and shapes from nature that gives it a human quality.
Okay. I, from what I can see from my point of view, they are definitely kind of playful. They are almost childlike too. Something there's an element of I mean, I like this whole thing about the kind of bug life sort of insect, metaphors or reference here, but also the kind of almost like children thing. I mean, it's quite interesting. It's very playful. It's very, it's happy. It's a happy figure. It's a happy element. Let's look at some other ones. The next one, Plexipus. Okay. You can see almost like a tear at the top. You know, it's quite interesting. The shapes varies from one to another. Interesting, yeah.
But this one is cool, Aishi. The full title is When the Raindrop Kisses the Plexippus. Plexippus is a form of a dolphin.
Okay.
And the raindrop is the
one at the top. Okay.
The top.
So there's the water element there. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'll just leave it to you. You can talk.
Okay. No, interesting. No, because I could see the water element with the raindrop and stuff like that. And although it has a kind of similar kind of approach, is different. The shapes are different. The shapes of these are different from bonobo, for example. Let's look at the next one. Sedna.
I like the green.
It's more like an animal, like this one, almost like a tail and a face and an eye, something like almost like a cubist sort of thing. When you see the sort of kind of in a different kind of angle, different kind of plane. It's quite, you know.
So there's a human being in there, I think, as well.
Yes, yes.
A human being in sort of some kind of dare I say it, sort of some kind of fluid, altered state of movement or something.
It's nice. It's quite interesting, actually. But again, it's a happy sculpture. There's a sort of kind of element of joy. What you're talking about, joy. Look, for example, if you talk about it, look at this, Misha. It's a dog taking his tongue out.
Yeah.
You know, and then you can see the tail of the dog and just kind of a playful dog, the eye, and with the tongue out.
It's really interesting. It's completely, that's what I'm more interested in, what I would tell you about.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely, but it's that element of, you know, it's almost like a, you know, I find them very, very playful. I find that, you know, the kind of even sculptures, or even you can create games for children with these kind of sculptures in kind of in a digital world. And we're going to talk about digital art later on, but that kind of element, it can be transferred to other kind of medium and stuff.
And I think you often put in a painter's like palette as well, you know.
Yeah.
By that,
yes.
That vertical stick. Yeah.
Let's continue with the sculptures.
They are,
and I'm fascinated by the names, Misha. The names are incredible. Tulipingua.
It's the 14-year-old that read Marquez. What do you expect?
Incredible.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of the times I name them after the indigenous kind of tribal gods, goddesses. Everything is amalgamated.
We can see with you. I tell you the interesting thing. Each one has a specific color.
Color is incredibly important in my work because it is the language of fertility, emotion, and attraction, which is all found in nature.
How many pieces of this have you done, Misha? Of the total, the whole series? How many are they?
The new body work is 8 pieces.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, fine. Good.
And I mean, I have so many more that really need to be kind of updated on the website.
Yeah, absolutely. But look at that. For example, this is an interesting one because this is more, you know, sort of kind of slightly less abstract. And I before doing the program, I was looking at some of your work, and some of your work includes pieces of furniture, which is also very playful piece of furniture and stuff like that, which I really, really enjoy it. But yes, this is very interesting. Yeah.
Beautiful.
A painting is beautiful. Yes, it's playful too. Yes, the amalgamation of quite a few elements there.
Almost when I look at your stuff, Misha, I always actually see you in it as well, which I think is also very pleasant thing.
Yeah, it's very pleasant. No, it's very, very pleasant. It's joyful too.
And I know you don't want to be with but your fashion as well has a lot of all this stuff in it. It's very
yes.
And then you get into the Juan, the ceramics.
Yeah. Okay. Let's look at let's talk about ceramics. Yeah. Tell us about your ceramics. Your approach to ceramics, Misha.
Yeah.
I don't really have an approach. It doesn't. The thing approaches me. I just make it. That's how I see it. And especially for the last, I would say, maybe a year to two since we're in pandemic. I have to do many other things that I wouldn't be doing, because if I was in my normal studio, I'd be doing something else. So I'm very, I work in stories, so each series kind of linear story, and it might be 6 pieces, 8 pieces, but everything has a kind of, the thing is, what I tend to do is I write a lot. So every single series comes with a text that's that's a collaboration between me and few writers, and it's very specific. So really, I apologize. I should have given you a bit more.
No. You don't need to apologize at all. You are giving us your work. I mean, it's and your time to talk about it. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
It's really important because you're asking me my approach to work, and I should have given you that research.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's just.
Well, okay. Yeah, but for example, look at this one. I mean, in the way that, for example, these figures here, from what you're telling, I mean, it's quite interesting because from what you're saying, I'm implying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they are almost like fables. They are almost like stories, and this is zoomorphic figures. They are animal-like figures.
Yeah.
So are we in a world of fables? Are we in a world in which each one has a character and plays part in a story, in a narrative which is written, but we just don't see it. We just see the figures. But there's an element of fableness, in this, which is quite interesting. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's very. I'm struck by there's this New Zealand artist called Ralph Hotary, and he never even explained or talked about his art at all, because he was so fascinated in other people's interpretations of it. And I think that's kind of part of the wonder of being
of art,
being in a sculpture, like on the word is more explicit to a certain point, not so much poetry. I think poetry is a lot of ambiguity, but all the different interpretations, very animalistic, as you say, Juan. Very colorful, very irregular, very asymmetrical. Like us as human beings as well, multifaceted, identity, etc. They're great, Misha. I mean, I don't think you as you say, you don't need to or explain them, or if you
exactly. In certain ways, it's for us to kind of work out our own narrative with them.
I think it's they are just, for me, they're just very connected, and I cannot disconnect them in any way, shape, or form. And maybe I'm also a little bit too close to the work to.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how protective are you of your work? Protective in the sense, how attached do you feel to it?
In what way? Like,
in which way? I mean, in the sense, like, for example, in the way of interpretations, for example, in the sense that I don't know, you will be fascinated with the way people interpret your work, obviously.
I'm really more interested in kind of how people feel about the work.
Yeah.
It's just so difficult, because if I was talking to people from my industry, this would be a very different conversation than talking to you guys. And there will be a point of reference, either that is very historical, which I can align to, like and I really don't want to take you down that intellectual route, because, when I was making these pieces, I was very much researching work around a kind of mid-century ceramics and some French ceramicists that I was inhabiting. It was also collaboration with a friend of mine to a certain extent. And it was also about trying to push the medium a little bit, making some larger pieces. There is this element, for me, it's always about let's see how I can paint on these objects. Let's turn them into this new space, which is between painting and sculpture and ceramic, and see if we can maybe not call it either painting or ceramic. But when you pick it up, and it's some of the pieces, Andre, you've seen these in real life, they I hope they're unique. So you go off and build a story, as in one goes off and builds a story with them. I think for me, it's just that I'm so focused onto what I'm doing next.
But it's interesting because there are the little elements, like for example, I'm looking at the titles, Dada in 2019 London, and then you got Fassbinder, which obviously I would associate with the famous German film director, of the 1980s, 70s, and 80s. And then you got John Berger, the famous critic of, ways of seeing. So you got this kind of thing. I find it really nice. I mean, I quite like those names to these pieces of ceramic.
I think for me, there's in ceramics, because ceramic is very tactile and it's also very primitive. And I am trying to get just my brain to be free rather than to be like rigidly intellectualizing and why.
Okay.
We are asked this a lot in our industry, like, to be very critically theoretical about the work, which is fine. I have no issues with that. So for me, ceramic is a little bit more freeing. It's like you feel your fingers and you go into your unconscious mind a bit more with ceramics. And the names are really very much like the homages to every single person that's ever inspired me. There was a whole series that I did, which is called Friends and Family, and every single piece is like, if you scroll down, you'll see there is Socrates and there is also
there's Plato. I can see Plato here. Socrates, the Kuni.
Yeah, or even some guy that when I was a kid and I was 15 years old in this amazing nightclub in Belgrade called Academia. Which was underneath the Academy of Arts, and the people that went to this club were all art students, and they painted this club every week, and it was the coolest place in town. And I was 15, and I blagged a DJing session. I went to this guy who was an organizer and said, "Please, can you let me DJ? I have these type of records." And I was like a kid, and they only allow me to play the music by a technician who was going to make sure that I don't mess up the equipment. And so basically somebody like that, to me, this really cool guy called Flecker, who sadly passed away because he had like a muscle degenerative disease, is as important as the Socrates or the Kuni. So these pieces have a kind of autobiographical
they're little homage, pieces of homage to thinkers and people who have touched your life. Yes, interesting. Interesting. Interesting, for example, the Kunin, how the Kunin is different from, well, this is Pablo. It's Pablo Picasso, that one? Is this a Pablo Picasso? I like the purity, the color, how plain color-like is the one for the Kunin, what you got there, compared to Socrates, much more colorful Socrates. And the dark colors of Jean-Paul Sartre and stuff.
I think also I have just to, give the credit to photography, because some of the photography brightens up the colors as well. And
okay.
Photography is an art in itself. Like how you light and how, etc. It's a real form of art, and it's really, it's a masterful thing to, I'm not claiming a mastery, but I've got somebody who takes photographs of these things, and it's like, to get that true color in photography is really difficult, especially when it comes to the paintings or drawings that I do. And some, like at the moment I do these watercolors on paper that I absolutely love to do. And I'll just show you one here. Just you can like to capture.
Well, there you are. Okay, fine. Okay, and you're painting. That's a painting of Plato, the ceramic. Is that a painting of Plato?
So Plato comes a lot. So basically, it's a kind of like a reference within a reference.
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean? So it's
self-referential. Self-referential.
It's always, and I would say more in a way that there's like a mythology that I like, my mythology with my creatures and my cartoon cards and my friends and things that I make, and they just have there's equality among all of them. They all have importance, and hence why I was talking about going into a chai shop or a market and picking something up and going like, oh, that has a value. That's it's been made by somebody across the world. And
Yeah. Well, that was the question to you, Misha, about how much were you attached to your sculptures. But I think it's about It's about the value of the object. It's about the value that we give to an object, or to a particular object. And in your case, for example, you've been the creator, the artist, the creator of these objects. Obviously, you give them a life in certain ways. It's a sort of kind of, you mythologize them, as you say. It's another kind of, it's a small element of mythologizing your work, which is absolutely fine. Which actually that's what true artists do in certain ways.
Yes, so I think
They,
you
they
like a mother and a father to something at the same time, if that's possible to be. You're
Yeah.
like you're
Yeah.
giving this life and kind of letting it go and seeing how it works. It does. Hopefully, it does some good to the world.
Yeah.
It influences people. You connect through it. I don't know. It's an exciting thing. But artists are very tortured because of this, because they're continuously, and I know this with myself and my friends and my colleagues, where I don't do it anymore because I'm like, I don't care anymore. I do this because I want to do this and I love it and I believe in it. Not to say that I'm a pig-headed person, but I've been through torture years of, oh my God, is this good enough? Is it valuable? Now I just do it because I love it and I really enjoy it and I'm okay with it. But as a young artist and a lot of my friends and like, you sit there and you think, is this gonna actually measure up in a historical sense? Does it really have any value whatsoever? And you get a bit tortured through your art training because you're meant to kind of add a piece onto a history of art. Like that's,
I think that's an important. I think I know what you mean. I think, and I tell you a comment. If I, an interpretation of what you're saying. The first interpretation is this: you are creating objects and releasing objects into the world.
Yeah.
And hopefully those objects give pleasure, any kind of pleasure, aesthetic pleasure, tactile pleasure, some kind of pleasure to people, to an individual or a group of people. And that's valid enough. Now, in terms of history, because art is always self-referential, and we always referring to these big artists and things, it's about measuring ourselves towards this one. But my point to you is this: measuring ourselves against these big artists. If I'm a writer, I'm as good as, I don't know, the Garcia Marquez, Jorge Luis Borges, or Julian Barnes, or I don't know who. I mean, whatever. Or John Berger. If I'm an art critic, I'm as good as John Berger. Or if I'm a filmmaker, I'm gonna be as good as Fassbinder. That kind of elements. But I do think that what has happened is that there has been a democratization of the artistic production. That democratization of the artistic production is that there's a lot of more people producing art and good art, but they are not gonna be they are not going to be the kings of art anymore. I think that it's going to be much more difficult to have these kind of idealized figures, the Pablo Picassos. It will be very, very difficult to see another Pablo Picasso in the future. People will have renown and will be recognized for talent, but not to the standards that they were kind of created in the past for some of these big artists. You know what I mean? At the time that Velázquez painted, for example, for me, he's one of the greatest artists of all time. Not many people were painting. People have the ability to paint. It was a very expensive profession. You have to have mecenas. You have to be part of, either the church was your mecenas or the king or the court. Otherwise, you were done. You could not do it. You could not do it. Nowadays, people can do it. The same with music. The same with writing. I mean, how many people could write books and read books 300, 400 years ago? Nowadays, almost everybody can do it. And it brings the whole thing about technology and the production of art in an industrial era in which everything can be transformed.
You still need big kahunas to do it because this is not for lighthearted. This kind of work is not. This kind of life is not for lighthearted. You have to be a bit crazy to do that. And to really this is my life. This is not just a hobby. It's my work. It's what I live from. And so maybe a lot of people can do it, but will they? Because you have to commit to the way of life, which is no going back once you start. So
I just listening here. I mean, I think you're absolutely right about the democratization of many things. Fashion. I remember coming across that phrase when they were talking about that quite unpleasant individual, Philip Green. He democratized fashion in the high street, And what I think you're alluding to is through technology and other things is more of everything.
Yeah.
Like my father often says, I don't know if I get published anymore.
Yeah.
I'm lucky I started when I did. And he's also a full-time artist. But it leads on perfectly to what I kind of would like to move into, actually, Misha, which was talking about what you just touched on, which is, you know, you become, you want to become, you are an artist, you go to art school, etc. You do these things. And a very, very well-known painter that I know said the one thing about art school is, he says, is that they don't teach people about the creative process in the sense of the struggle, the work ethic, the actual lifestyle. They, everyone sees an end product, how to survive. Uh, you know, they don't teach people about what he calls the grind. Like, this particular individual is a 9-to-5er, and he says they don't teach you these kind of things. And then other people, and then the business side of it, and
you don't get to
you know,
any of it.
you don't get taught any of it, and
Sounds like it's a dirty word, you don't get taught how to sell. You get taught no skills apart. You don't even get taught to draw technically. Or if you're a sculptor, I think my mates in sculptures you have a technician who you can ask, but you don't have like a classical training like we back in socialist countries have had, really classical training. I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing. I cannot tell you, but there is no skill. You don't acquire jack shit when you're in art schools. You're just thrown into a world, and you have to be stubborn to survive.
Yeah.
And sorry, and I think, when you talk about the previous socialist countries and along the line of movements, there's a lot of foundation and technique which goes on, because I know a few people have been to art school a long time ago and now, and writing schools, etc., and they say the differences are quite stark, like in terms of, like you say, people not getting taught the fundamentals, the foundations, the basics, etc. And I find that fascinating. And when we were talking, you were alluding, Juan, you were mentioning technology. Now, I know, Misha, that very soon in February, you've got an exhibition in London at the Della Sposa or Della Posta?
Della Sposa.
Della Sposa. I always think of Mariposa when I say that word.
What is Sposa? It sounds like a good name.
Yeah, Della Sposa Gallery in February here in London. And am I right or wrong to say your exhibition is going to be a lot of technology, virtual technology, or fill me in here, fill us in?
Okay, so because we cannot put works into the gallery for obvious reason, we have decided to have an experiment and to kind of be a little bit progressive with it all and create the whole exhibition digitally. So the sculptures some of them that you saw are what we call renders, which means that they have been created digitally, and you're going to be able to see them 360. And so we see how it goes. It's going to be a new thing, so people will be able to see the exhibition digitally, really. So that's the new show.
It's fascinating because I hear in the grapevine, people talking about virtual this, virtual that, virtual galleries, virtual banking, and now I hear about digital art and you doing digital art. And I saw one of the ones that you sent me, and for me it looked it just looked very real. Actually, it looked as if, if it was blowing up a bit more, actually it looked as though I was in the room, and that was just an image, actually. So are you sort of excited about this? And this seems for my ignorant eyes, this seems very new.
Okay, no, I'm very excited about it. I'm not an expert, but I'm excited about any use of new medium, which, like, if you think about it, only 100 years ago, people were using film. It was a new thing, and it was like, wow, artists started to use it. So it's a form of, it's like a new pen. It's a new pigment for me. And also it means that it can democratize art in the way that you can have no representation as an artist and you can put your own exhibition together. If you click, for example, onto the first row in the middle.
Whispering Wine series, this one?
Whispering Wind series.
Whispering Wind, okay, fine. Sorry, Whispering Wind series, sorry.
So these paintings, just to give you an example, are real paintings, but the space we put them into is completely digital. So it's made to present the work. So if you click, say, on a second image, Juan, if you would.
This one?
Yes, that's
this one.
That's right.
Okay.
So that room does not exist.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about. That's how my exhibition is going to look like. It's going to look like, because you can't go there, you're going to imagine you're in the space. And what I find exciting about that you can create any space you want, and you can even create an exhibition that could be situated in any city in the world, even on a different planet if you want to. And that's a really exciting thing. There is a whole virtual museum of art called VOMA, VOMA. A friend of mine is director of it. It's started by an artist called Stuart Semple, and it's precisely for this reason, to kind of democratize the space, and also to give ability to people that cannot come from London to London from outside of London, wherever city they are. They could be, up in Scotland and Wales, and it's, it's educational. It's also, it can be culturally, cultural, in terms of cultural preservation of artwork is amazing as well. So there's hundreds of possibilities here.
And also create an extra dimension, which is the space in which this art is supposed to be placed. I could, as you say, I can create in a space. I can create the most kind of modern gallery. That gallery in Rio de Janeiro, that is like the one designed by Oscar Niemeyer. I don't remember what it's called. It looks like an UFO, like over the bay in Rio de Janeiro. I've been there, so I can put it there. You can imagine, like with the sea in the background. So it's not only the work of art per se, the artifact, but it's also the surroundings of that artifact. That's an interesting proposition.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like a cinematic experience, because the cinema is happening in your head in terms of narrative. You create a location that maybe doesn't exist, but in a movies it doesn't exist. It's a form of projection. And then you kind of drop in the elements of art that could either be done for, in my case, in terms of like, this is new work, this is what I've created, and I really want to show it. I cannot show it, it's pandemic, millions of reasons. There it is, people can view it, and it presents the vision of an artist, and it can be done. It's also very, the word I'm looking for is, it has a good factor of, half of these works are only digitally produced, so there is no cost that is vast. There is no environmental impact that is horrific, because a lot of these fairs and museums are shipping the works, schlepping things around, cost thousands of pounds to do that. But also, the impact on environment is vast as well, etc. So, you have a lot going, but at the same time, we don't want to just live in that world. We also want to make a hybrid of these two worlds and get the best out of both of them. That's really what I'm interested in. I don't want to just be in a digital and virtual world. I would be very unhappy. I want to be with the people, but because we cannot be, we'll just do our best. It's really, the technology has now pushed us 10 years ahead in my industry to really kind of become more inventive, and that's I'm trying to.
Would you agree with the statement, Misha, that COVID has accelerated the production of the impact of the thinking around digital art?
It was already happening in America.
It was already happening, but COVID in certain ways is speeding the whole thing up because of the reality in which we are living now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, art business model is like a 17th century. It's based on trust between people. It's normally for very wealthy type of individuals. I'm not talking about the level I am at in terms of my prices, but people that buy art are very wealthy normally.
Yeah.
And it's normally done by handshake between two men normally, buyers and sellers. And this could see a completely new democratization of the space and the business model. So that's exciting as well.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm just laughing because I know a man who buys and sells art, and he's not the most pleasant chap, and he used to make enormous amounts of money from not having the actual talent of the people making it or around it. So so I was just laughing at that. We always laugh with each other here, not at each other. So I was having a chuckle because what you're talking about is very true, isn't it? And this is you call it a digital space, but you also talk about and some of the stuff I've read of yours, you talk about cultural exchange. And look, if there's kids and elder tribes people in Tonga who can come online and see something in London or Rio de Janeiro or somewhere like that. So because you mentioned your interest in those kind of cultural exchanges. So as long as I guess we keep it in balance.
Yeah, of course. I mean that we have different issues around the kind of firewalls, protection, safety, security, all this kind of stuff. I just want to mention the emergence of crypto art, which I find very exciting, and also these non-fungible tokens, which are NFTs, and they're essentially connected to. Sorry, it just slipped my mind. Brain fog, COVID brain. They're blockchain technology inventions, and that's a really exciting thing and a new thing. And they've already created a bunch of buying and selling kind of trading platforms between themselves, and there's quite a few millions turning around in these industries. But what's very interesting is decentralizing the market. It's using a digital currency. I think it's called Ethra or one of those. It's not Bitcoin. And these are the kind of young, hip, cool kids that are just really, I love what they're doing. There's a lot of crap art in it because it's kind of on a street art level that I personally do not like very much because it's slightly rudimentary. But once you dig through it and you start to look through it, you will find some really beautiful, incredibly sensual and very moving artworks, and they are either done through GIFs or animation, and they're what they call digitally native, and they're beautiful. And I predict, you can quote me on this, that in about 3 years to 5 years, every single big gallery will have their own crypto digital art office within the gallery, because it will become part of the work and part of the reality, and it's very exciting because it's new.
Awesome.
Yeah, indeed, incredible.
Well, I'm just aware that we're kind of coming to the end of our hour with Misha in conversation. Is there anything anyone else sort of wants to touch on or offer or
the usual question? I mean, the kind of standard question for somebody who works in different medium. I mean, of the 3 mediums that you are working now, 4, if we include the digital now, which one is your favorite so far? I mean, or it changes. I mean, it changes. Sometimes it's culture. Now you are into digital. How, or do you have a preference?
No, you're right, Juan. It's always a painting. It's always painting. I'm a painter. I'm a very, very painterly painter. My best friends are painters, and we are a little tribe. We really I'm a sort of person, I'm happy to paint. I don't even need to have to eat or drink water.
Yeah. Okay.
I could paint all day, all night,
Yes.
and that's really where that's my core.
Yeah.
But I want to ask two of you, if I can, because I
Yeah.
know you have asked me questions. Could I ask you both something?
Yeah, can I ask you a final one? And my final question, promise, and you can ask me any question you want. The final question is this: Plato, the ceramic Plato, was Plato first painted or was made as a three-dimensional figure first? Was it first a ceramic or a painting?
It was first ceramic. You need to, you
Okay.
always build the ceramic first.
And then you paint them. Okay, fine. Okay.
Ceramic is
Okay.
really interesting because it's a very lengthy process. You have to build it bit by bit because otherwise it cracks, and that we could do another hour just on a technicality and pitfalls of ceramic, and sometimes your kiln can explode and destroy everything. And Grayson Perry has a great saying about ceramic. It's an exercise. What did he say? It's an exercise in disappointment.
In disappointment.
Well, because you never know.
Because what is in your head is not what it comes out. Fine,
No,
fine.
absolutely. It depends on the if it's raining outside.
Yeah.
The quality of your glazes could change. The colors can be.
Your mood, you know.
Not with your mood. It's technical.
Okay.
It's to do with your kiln. It's to do with your clay. It's to do with drying. It's so interesting. This is ceramic is completely unpredictable. It's very primitive. It's very primal. It's like made out of earth, and you do it with your hands, and it's very like dirty and dusty and stuff. And then you put it in a kiln, and it blows up, and you've done works months, weeks on it. It's a really amazing and very passionate and very primitive peasant-like medium. And I love it. So my question for two of you, and I know maybe you both are not very kind of art-driven people, visual people, but if you can choose a work of art that has had some importance and influence on you, what would that be and why?
Okay, me.
Okay, Juan, you can go first.
It does a work of art in general. We're talking about pictorial art. Painting.
Could be anything that is art that has had.
What is it? Interesting. Well, you say. I mean, my taste has changed so much. I mean, nowadays I even just published a book of poetry, and I got a poem about Las Meninas by Velázquez, which I think is fascinating. But Las Meninas Velázquez is something that I came later in life. When I was young, for example, the thing that influenced me and really kind of triggered my imagination almost was somebody like Salvador Dali. But I was very young. I was 8, 9 years old. And it's quite interesting. I'll tell you something. As a teacher, I'm a secondary school teacher. And I took my students to go to see Guernica because we were doing Guernica, one of the courses. So I went to see Guernica at the Reina Sofia in Madrid. Okay, and they were and we organized this, and they were Spanish students. They were studying Spanish. So the idea was that having a presentation with in a kind of very direct, simplistic Spanish, but well presented explanation about Guernica. That's, as you know, I don't know, Misha, you have seen the painting in Madrid. It's an enormous, huge mural at the Reina Sofia Museum in Madrid. Opposite on the other side, on the other salon, on the other kind of room, is all Salvador Dali. And I remember my students were, how old were they? About 14, 15 years old. And they look at Guernica, they pay attention, blah, blah. They were not, I don't know. I didn't see any reaction. I'm asking them, what do you think about it? Guernica and the symbolism of the Spanish Civil War, stuff like that. The moment they walk into Dali's room, my goodness, they were just bang. It was that kind of thing. And I remember for me at that time, Salvador Dali was quite a staggering painter. But very early on, my taste has changed. But it happens. I mean, you go after another one. Like with poetry, I started with Jorge Luis Borges, and now I read people like very, very diverse writers from him. So I don't know, in pictorial art, I presume this my long-winded answer to you is there is a progression. with certain people, you start to stay with certain painters and stuff like that. Velasquez, for me, for example. But yeah, but the first
And why?
painters.
Why Velasquez? Did
Oh,
you?
I think it's superb. I think it's intellectual. Is the whole thing. I think Las Meninas is the best painting. I mean, I got a whole theory about Las Meninas. That's my own theories about Las Meninas. First, it's a painting of painting. It subverts the whole vision of representation. It's a completely subversion of representation. You got a painting in which first the painting is big. It's not a small one. People talk about La Gioconda by Leonardo da Vinci. Fine, that's La Gioconda, but nothing like Las Meninas. Las Meninas is huge. I think what happened was Las Meninas didn't have a lot of impact because Spain was apart from the rest of Europe. So Spain remains sort of kind of an obscure country. Even when they did civilizations, this famous Kenneth Clark TV series about art, Spain was left completely behind. But why Las Meninas? Because subvert representation, and it's a referential. It's a painting about painting. And guess what? And I'll tell you what. And this is my own theory. I never read anywhere else. Las Meninas could have to be painted without El Quixote. Why? Because Quixote is a book about the book. It's a referential. So Velasquez, who obviously read Quixote, said, well, look at this guy. He's writing a book about writing the book. So I'm going to get a painting about a painting about painting. And Las Meninas is that painting. And it's just so superb. And it's just everything in that painting is just so cleverly done. Everything has a meaningful element and playful. Is the game. Is the much in terms of if art is a game, and I think it is in many aspects, is the highest expression of that artistic game. People talk about Rembrandt, Vermeer, fine, yes, but no like Velasquez and Las Meninas. Perhaps I'm biased because I'm from the Hispanic culture, but I do believe that that's the best painting ever painted. That's all. Anyway, sorry. Sorry, I'm a little spiel on Las Meninas. Apologies for that. Sorry.
Andrea, what about you?
Well, my first exposure to painting was by a New Zealand Māori artist called Ralph Hoteri. Then poetry, my dad's poetry. And then literature was Roald Dahl when I was a little kid, and C.S. Lewis. So those were
good references
influences to me. There was a guy called Graham Sidney, who's a friend of my father's, who's a landscape painter from New Zealand, who's very famous, who paints in egg tempera. So it was kind of like possibly a bit like you, Juan, you in the Latino world, mine was in New Zealand and a Māori world. With Māori culture has lots of sculpture in it, and totem poles and things like that. And then, I like Goya, anything classical really. I can remember being in an art gallery with this guy called Graham Sidney, who's interesting and worth checking out, and a friend of ours. And he did something similar, Juan. I mean, I'm not schooled in art like you two, etc. But he took me to the National Art Gallery and asked me what was going on. And I tried my best. He said, no, but he said, what happens here is if you watch the crowd, who are largely, uneducated but interested, etc., they always stop at the best stuff because the best stuff arrests them, stops them, often tells a story.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. So that would be my answer, and I think what really detonated me musically was Rage Against the Machine. I listened to Rage Against the Machine for a lot as a student, and the grunge era, and then I went to a big concert and saw them live, and I stepped back, and it was a combination of my age and a recession going on in our country. And I stepped back and I just heard words of international socialism and justice and empathy for the indigenous wrapped up in rock songs. And that really changed my world, actually. Completely changed my world into a world of interest into injustice and politics and etc. So it's very powerful art, because I also come from a sporting background, and having a father who's a famous poet, he always said to me, that he often felt like an outsider in the arts because a lot of the artistic people shunned sport, and he loved sport, and he thought that sport was very artistic and very great, graceful and elegant and stuff. So yeah, other things, but I don't profess to be knowledgeable on painting and sculpture, etc. I would say one more last thing. I love the art of Gauguin when he went to Tahiti, you know, images, because I guess I'm still from the South Pacific, and the colors, etc. And my brother-in-law, John Anthony Richardson,
Oh,
on Instagram. He is a former Royal Academician and someone who shunned the art world really through sort of a punk rock ethic.
a very, very talented painter, yes.
World-class painter. And you, Misha, of course.
Yeah, Misha too, of course, yes.
And
but I'm gonna, I wanted to ask something about the Misha question. Sorry, one thing which interesting with what you said, Andre. One thing, when you don't have a look, I grew up in a house. Look, I didn't tell you this. When I left secondary school, I wanted to study history of art. That was my first choice. I wanted to study history of art. Why? Because my art teacher in secondary school, which I didn't know anything about art, was really cool. Was amazing. And she got me into it, really. I mean, he was a good teacher that I have. But we didn't have any. I didn't have access to art at all. I was growing in Bogota for a kind of, what can I say, lower middle class family, books were expensive. We used to buy books on credit. You used to pay books on credit. The first Gabriel Garcia Marquez novel that you read at the age of 14, I arrived at home, and I think it was paying 3 months installments or something like that. Yeah. Galleries in Bogota, there were no galleries in Bogota. Contemporary art, there was. So the whole thing is, I gravitated when I started university towards these people who used to like cinema, art, and stuff. Even if I was studying chemistry at the time. I used to hang out with the art, so people studying art. And I found it fascinating, much more interesting people I could talk to. So I gravitated, and when you do that, you have to educate yourself. You self-educate yourself. It's very different when you grow up in an artistic environment. When you see painters, or your uncles are painting, or painters at home, or people discover art, or you got books of art, when you look at them. It's very, very different, I think. Probably that's distorted in a sense. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm not saying that to like Las Meninas is better and not to like Las Meninas. No, it's just that in certain ways it's a progression, and through your education, your own education takes you in certain direction. I think you are the product. Your education are the product of your own sort of kind of, how can I say, obsessions, minor obsessions. That's where education takes you. Your real education, because the real education is always yourself. You are the person who educates yourself. The other ones are guidance that people give you. But it's the product of our obsessions, I think.
Absolutely. Every artist is an obsessive, for sure, 100%. If you could take 3 things with you to the desert island, what would they be? Just 3 things. Like, obviously you have your stuff packed with, like, shaving creams and all this stuff. And some, nice comfortable pajamas and things like that, and soaps and flannels and nice things. So if you had 3 things to take culturally, emotionally, with objects and art and books, music, what would they be? Each one of you. Andre, you can go first.
You go first, yeah. There's an island this question. Okay, yeah. But
well, I would have to take a really stimulating book. So I don't know exactly which one it would be. We started with Marquez. Maybe it would be Marquez. He's very influential on me. But I would probably, if I did then, I would take Love in the Time of Cholera.
Yeah.
I would take a resistance band so I could work out.
Oh, that's a good thing.
Mind you, I'm on a desert island. I should be able to find trees and other stuff. And so I don't know what else I would take. I mean, I think I'd have to go back and prepare for this, Misha, to be honest. That Radio 4 program, does it?
We don't want you to think about it. Just go automatic. Like, okay, 3 things that just come into your mind. It's not about...
I'd probably take a knife as well.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that, but I was thinking about a machete. Machete.
No, this is about culture. This is
culture.
I'm talking about
Oh,
culture.
you have to take a book.
Okay. I'd take Love in the Time of Cholera to read.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'd take. I probably need to be peaceful, so I'll probably take something nice like that Debussy orchestral music. That would be peaceful.
Next.
And then I would, because I'm on a desert island, I would probably take a picture of all the people that I like and love.
Oh, beautiful. What about you, Juan?
No, gosh. Well, it was only one book. That's an interest. That's a difficult proposition. I mean,
You want three things. So don't think about it. Just go, three things.
Okay, well, I mean, one book that probably I would take would be A History of Philosophy by Bertrand Russell. It's a book that I have read and reread and read all the time. But competition is enormous. Quixote, I will take Quixote anytime. Or Borges, Jorge Luis Borges collected works, I will take that one too. But of the three, probably it's between Quixote and Bertrand Russell. Music too. I will take some music, definitely. I don't know. I mean, it has to be classical, probably. I would go also for classical music. I don't know. It has to be something a bit more kind of something like Brahms or something. I like Brahms. I'm not a big connoisseur of classical music. I listen to classical music, but I'm not a big connoisseur. And the other thing, I don't know. I would say something like something which is sensual. I don't know. Some kind of nice piece of clothing that gives me pleasure to wear or something. I don't know. But I presume that would be the case. Provided that food and everything else and a machete is at hand and that stuff, that's fine. Yeah.
And
That
you,
would be it. What about you, Misha?
Oh, me. Very quickly from the top of my head.
Yeah.
Paints and brushes for sure.
Oh.
And maybe a little bit of canvas, or hopefully I can make canvas on something, palm trees and things. I would take, there's an amazing Serbian writer who's absolutely phenomenal. He's called Danilo Kish. I would take a complete tome of his work because he's like our Marquez, but
has been translated into English?
I don't know. I can find out for you.
Danilo Kish, okay. I will check it out.
It's not, you can't compare them. There is no magic realism. It's
okay, no, fine. No, that's fine.
It's beautiful, stunning writer. And I would take complete works of Chopin with me.
Okay, ooh, okay.
Because I just get so much from Chopin, and it's very gentle.
It's quite interesting that in terms of music, do you work with music, Misha? Do you have music background?
Huge. I cannot live without music.
But work with music. Do you need the music to work?
I think I do.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, I would like to say I don't, but I listen to music from the first minute I open my eyes almost to before I go to bed.
Yeah, me too. I listen to music every day. But the interesting thing is about the music that, I mean, I try to pay attention about my productivity in relation to the music that I'm listening to. Somehow, you know what I mean?
For me, it's always the best music for me that frees me is jazz, and especially the kind of 50s and 60s, like Thelonious Monk, that kind of very abstract jazz that people like François Truffaut used in his movies, and that just, it's what I would consider like, it just opens your mind, kind of, it's cosmic. Alice Coltrane, I mean, the list goes on. That to me, and jazz as well. Jazz to me is art, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah, amazing. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So look, anyway, guys, now I'm just going to wind it up now because I think it's probably way more than an hour. Pardon me. Sorry, last words, Misha?
No, I said it's cool. We good to go. I mean, we've done 2 hours.
Okay, cool. So on behalf of Juan and myself, cprradio.podomatic.com and Revista Pero Negro, we'd like to thank you again, Misha Milovanovic, for coming into our virtual Zoom studio to talk about your multifaceted art and life. And we'll be posting this up on YouTube and podomatic.com with all your details, etc. and that. So, thank you very much again for dropping in.
Thank you, guys. It was so much fun. We must do it
No,
again just to talk without recording.
absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Misha. Thank you.
Because I love, do you want to stop recording or?
I just have.
No, it says recording still.
Oh,
Does it say? Where is it? Oh, yeah.